I guess let's get started. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Claus, C baby.
See,
Uh,
baby.
I'm a principal product manager in the Azure core team, and I work with all of our third party distro partners like yourselves.
Hmm.
I'm a dinosaur. I've been here literally this month, 29 years as a
I just,
Microsoft FTE. I don't know if you saw that.
yeah, LinkedIn just told me that.
Yeah, LinkedIn knows.
I
So
was like,
29 years as
that
an
is quite a
FTE.
run.
But I was a vendor for 2 years prior to that. So I actually started like on Microsoft campus. I was Claus W for 2 years. So I started in '93.
That's
Yeah, never really. I mean, I never planned on being here for that long, but it's been a really cool ride, and I feel like I've worked for 5, 6 different companies in the during that time. Just always find these little new startup-y kind of groups within Microsoft. But
yeah.
when I started, it was still I was in help desk. I joined in help desk in internal IT, and we still ran DOS 622, Windows 3.1. Our mail servers were Xenix servers. I don't know if you remember Xenix,
I do remember
our
Linux.
very own Linux, not Linux, Unix at the time. And yeah, I could VTP in from a dumb terminal, or from a dumb terminal, or VTP into my mail server over XNS Xenix networking services. We weren't even on the internet back then. If you wanted to be on the internet, you had to call me. I had to put a separate card into your PC and wire you up and give you a static IP so you could get to the internet. Good times, good times,
Glorious.
glorious. So
All
that's me.
right. I'm officially out of order now, but I guess that's me.
Yep.
I feel like most of the people reading this or watching this are not gonna be surprised about who I am, but that's me. I'm a dork. I love Star Wars. I will fight to the death about how, even though Anakin became Darth Vader, he was actually bringing balance to the Force. And I will.
Them are fighting words.
I know it's really fun. I have this to like solidify how much of a dork I am. I have a spreadsheet in which I have put everything that I have seen in the Star Wars universe in chronological order, including the the Clone Wars movie that you can only watch on YouTube. Like all of there's some books that I've read. They're just all in my little spreadsheet, and I keep showing it to people, and they're like, this is too much." And I'm like,
That's
"No, it's
commitment.
not."
You. That's commitment.
So that's me. And you already went through your. I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that so much. So
But
what do you mean CrossFit is open source?
it is.
How is that? How? I
You
guess,
go,
yeah.
you go to CrossFit.com and you can download all the methodology, all the training books, all the level 1, 2, 3 coaching guides, the stuff that you go through when you go to a seminar to become a coach. All the here's how you program, here's nutrition, here's how you do your work, here's how you program your workouts to stimulate your pathways and all that stuff. It's all open source.
That's
No
amazing.
login required. You can just download it and knock
That's
yourself
fantastic.
out. The whole philosophy, the whole methodology, it's all out there. And
That's
people
amazing.
publish articles all the time around their experiences and what they've learned, and it's all there for the taking.
Well, good. That's fantastic. Also, I'm a Fallout widow, so I'm on the other side of the Fallout bit.
Yeah, I'm coming off of it now, so it's
Oh, that's good.
all right.
Well, I think you're starting, so why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure. And I want to give credit where credit is due here. The next couple slides were taken from a wonderful presentation that Jack and Kashan in our Linux systems group did at the Open Source Summit in Seattle a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
It's on YouTube. We can probably put a link somewhere
I bet we can.
later. Yeah, it's a
I'll make
really
a note for myself.
yeah, it's a really good. There's a bunch of other really good presentations in there, but Jack and Kashan did the what was it called? You don't know jack about Linux and Linux and Azure. And they kind of went through a little bit the history, and that's what I'm taking here. So thank you, Jack and Kashan. So why it says in the beginning there was dog. I don't know if many people know this, but the original code name for Azure was Red Dog. So that's why in the beginning there was dog.
I love it.
And that was in the early teens, 20 teens. And we've come a long way since then. Actually, the first two Linux distros that were available on Red Dog, it was called Windows Azure at the time, not even Microsoft Azure, were CentOS and Ubuntu at the time. So CentOS has been there since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it feels a little silly to put this slide up, but most people actually don't know this, is that more than half of our external cores run Linux. So a lot of people, I still get this, and I don't know what to do about it. It says, well, isn't Azure for Windows? Like, no, it's not. Our customers would disagree.
Right? When I was at Microsoft for about 6 months last year, and I was still like, even I was surprised when I came in and we started talking about the numbers and what people were adopting on Azure. I was blown away by how much Linux adoption there was.
It's a huge adoption, and it's growing faster than anything else. So it's Linux and Azure. It's a thing. It's real.
Yeah.
And we work, and that's part of my job, and in partnership with Jack and a bunch of other people, right? It takes a village to make Linux a good experience in Azure, and that's what I do. I work with the third party distro providers. So does Jack, so does Kashan, so do dozens, if not hundreds of people.
Yeah. For anybody that's not sure why Claus keeps mentioning Jack is on the AlmaLinux board. Claus works with Jack regularly, like daily.
Full time daily.
Right. So I'm sure he'll come up a lot in our conversation.
Yeah. So it's Linux is huge in Azure. And this is customers running 60+% of the course, but AI, perfect example. AI runs on Linux. Our own AKS offering, our Kubernetes service runs on Linux. Database services, Prometheus. I mean, we heavily depend on open source in Azure, and we also heavily contribute to it, which I think is one of the things that we do a little bit differently. We don't just use it; we contribute back upstream, pretty much everything that we do. Which
the job that I had when I was there was contributing to open source for Microsoft, and like I didn't even know that existed before I got hired to do it. It proved that Microsoft was putting its money where its mouth was.
Oh, we're all in.
It's true.
All right.
True.
So 60K open source component, 30,000 plus of our employees have GitHub accounts. 7.6K. I mean, it's just some numbers. I don't know if interesting is. So we are very heavily invested and embedded in multiple open source projects. A little bit more detail on the next slide. You'll see, we contribute to the Linux kernel, integration services. VS Code is like one of the, if you don't use it, please do. It's like one of the most popular open source tools that we make available to anybody. GitHub, obviously, right? So we're the one thing that we also have. I mean, we have our own Linux distro now that most people have probably heard of, Azure Linux, right? Sits under AKS and a bunch of our internal offerings. But we also have Flatcar, which we donated to CNCF last year, and Inspector Gadget, Headlamp, etc. A couple other open source projects that we run and contribute to.
Yep.
So we're everywhere.
Everywhere.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about CentOS. The wonderful moment that's only a little over a month away now.
A month and 2 days.
Yeah, so I don't think I need to go through what CentOS is. I think everybody knows what it is.
Can I tell you something insane?
What?
I was at DockerCon last year, and I said something about CentOS end of life, and they were like, "Well, I'm on CentOS 8, so I'm okay." And I said, "Oh, No, so they shortened the life of CentOS 8, and it's
Oh,
already end of life, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And so, like, I as much as I want to believe that everybody knows that this is coming, I know that there are people that still haven't caught on. So, with that,
yeah, well, that one is new. I haven't heard that one yet, but I have talked to a lot of customers about their plans.
yes,
What are you planning to do? And we'll go through some of the themes that have come out of those discussions. But I've yet to find one that didn't know it was coming. I have
it's
some other,
surprising.
yeah, I have some customers. I was talking to one pretty large like consulting company, and I says, I'm not worried about CentOS at all, but like there's all these other end of lives coming up or behind them. Like we had, what was it last year? 1804 for Ubuntu went end of life, and most people don't realize RHEL 7 is going into extended life cycle, and RHEL 6 is going permanently end of life. Same time, right? June 30th.
Yep.
And there's some SUSE ones coming up. So this life cycle management is it's here to stay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, CentOS is probably a little bit of an outlier because it permanently goes into life, but this life cycle management is something that is just bread and butter for anybody running an IT organization.
Yeah.
Cool. So here's kind of the themes that, I mean, there was a lot of different things that came up in our conversations, but here's where kind of the big ones that came up over and over again is, the decision points or the kind of decision matrix that customers have to choose is like, number one, do I need to retain, ABI compatibility?
Mm-hmm.
I need to stay CentOS RHEL compatible, or can I afford to go to another distro?
Mm-hmm.
The other one, they could probably be switched, community versus commercial. It depends a little bit on who you talk to, which one is kind of primary. But, do I want to stay with the community/free distro, or do I have the option, or do I want to go down like a commercial route where I start paying for either all or partial of my Linux estate? And then a lot of customers are looking at this kind of inflection point to decide whether they should start looking at things like modernization, containerization, PaaS, right? Consolidation, even in some scenarios. So, like, do I use this opportunity to make a bigger change and modernize, not just address what I have in place?
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big ones. There's two other ones that are kind of high on the list, like FIPS. Actually, no, go ahead to the next slide.
Okay.
FIPS.
Yeah.
And FIPS, does it have FIPS, and is it free? That was a big decision point for a lot of customers. I didn't realize that when
Interesting.
we started talking. Yeah, and then also CentOS has a huge usage and penetration in like gov clouds, in government agencies. So is it certified to run in these foreign clouds? That was another one. That was a pretty big one.
Yep.
And then usually the whole thing is like, hey, what do I, do I migrate while I upgrade? Do I move stuff into the cloud that I have on-prem? Do I leave it on-prem? Do I need to evacuate my data center? So there's some pretty complex decision processes going on as customers address this. And every customer is a little bit unique, so you can't really go with a broad brush. And I get this question all the time. What's the best thing to do for them? I go, I'm a consultant at heart. It depends, right? Where do you want to go? What's your timeline? How many VMs? What are they running? What are the workloads, right? So you really need to take a look at this. But in general, redeploying, I'm a big fan of redeployment if you can, right?
Yep.
I mean, even when back in the day when I was a Windows admin, right, is when you had a major OS upgrade or change, I would redeploy anytime I could. In-place upgrades were always a little suspect to me. Even though they work, if I have the choice, I would always redeploy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the big sort of mega points that a lot of customers are struggling with, and some of the themes that really came out. And then the one thing that people kind of had to come to grips with also is like, you're going to be in a heterogeneous environment, right? It's like this pure everything the same. It's just not a reality anymore. With acquisitions, divestitures, there's no shadow IT thing springing up, and you're acquiring legacy debt. So you're going to have to figure out how to manage a heterogeneous environment.
Yeah.
And things like, how do I manage my hybrid estate, right? What if a lot of stuff can't come off on-prem for whatever reason? How do I still manage that in a similar way that I do the cloud and take advantage of some of the same concepts, which is where we have Azure Arc that can help with that. But there's other ways you can do that too. So these are some of the things that we've talked to a lot of customers, and some are still struggling with it. Some, we had one ISV. It was impressive to see them. They migrated, I think it was 80,000 VMs in under 2 months.
Wow.
Complete redeploy. Right.
That's an incredible feat.
Yeah, that was impressive to watch. So
they got some smart people working there.
Oh, well, they're an ISV, so software is kind of their thing. So
yeah.
But yeah, so it can be done, and people can move super fast. And we've seen people start addressing it, right? If we look at the curve of CentOS adoption, it's starting to go down, but it'd be really interesting to see when the numbers from May come out, because I do expect a pretty big drop.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool.
Agreed.
Next, I think this is, oh yeah. This is just my little call to action, and go check out Alma. We have it in the marketplace, and it's actually, adoption is really starting. I think it's doubled in the last couple of months. It's really growing fast. So people are adopting it, which is cool to see. And you also have for any Windows users out there, right? Alma is only a click away on the desk. Right. So I always tell, when I talk to our field about Linux, well, what are we doing? I said, well, you're a WSL -- install away from having Linux on your desktop. There's really no excuse not to start getting engaged, and almost in the Windows Marketplace, and it's in the Azure Marketplace. So go check it out and let us know how it goes. We love feedback.
We also love feedback, and we love to see the adoption and the encouragement there. Getting AlmaLinux into the marketplace and getting it ready for WSL wasn't like challenging necessarily, but it definitely had some hoops that needed to be jumped through, shall we say. And it was a learning curve for all of our infra people, and it was really, I think now they're feeling confident and they're excited about it, but it was definitely a learning curve.
It's all marketplaces, and it's, as you said, there's process, there's agreements you have to sign, and terms and conditions, and there's new tools, and
all of that.
We appreciate the investment on your behalf. We're glad to have you, and
you guys were amazing helping us through it too. So
go deploy.
Yes, go deploy. So my slides, I'm gonna kind of run through a little bit of AlmaLinux's history quickly. I think probably most of this, Claus, but stop me if there's anything new or remarkable. I'm going to start here because this is one of my favorite images to show. This image is recent up to 2011. And this is just the Red Hat ecosystem that existed up to 13 years ago. This is a good show of all of the use that Red Hat forks and clones and deviations and repacks have given to the Linux ecosystem at large, and so how many different parts of the world this distribution ends up serving. In my world, this is the one that mattered the most for me. I got started with CentOS when I was starting at the in the web hosting industry, and web hosting is built on CentOS primarily. So that was what I knew. I walked in on day one and they said, okay, set up your workstation. And they handed me a box and said, install whatever you want. And I said, well, what am I going to be supporting? And they said CentOS. And I said, okay, I'm going to start with that. And that's what I used for the 10 years that I worked there. And for 15 years, this was the pattern that we in the ecosystem saw, was this Fedora to Red Hat to CentOS. CentOS always took a little bit of time to get released after Red Hat, but once it did, it was stable and awesome, and we as users loved it. Then in 2019, Red Hat introduced this thing called CentOS Stream, which is awesome, honestly. It sits between Fedora and Red Hat in the build stream for anybody that's not familiar, but I'm sure most of the folks that are watching this are. Here we see Red Hat trying to correct some of the problems that have always existed with CentOS. If you find a bug in CentOS, you can't report it and get it fixed in any kind of good or quick way, because it has to go through that build tree again to get released. So this really helps solve a lot of the problems that we as users had with CentOS, but it still wasn't Red Hat downstream, right? And then in the end of 2020, Red Hat announced that they were shifting all of the resources that had historically been used for CentOS Linux to CentOS Stream. And this had a massive impact in the ecosystem, from all of those downstream forks and repacks that we all saw, to anyone relying on the stable operating system that CentOS was for innovation, or for as a nonprofit, they needed something cheap that they knew they could get some community support for, or honestly, all that, the kind of stuff that comes with a stable operating system that had been relied on for 15 years, right? Lots of folks recognized the impact this was going to have, and nobody that was familiar with the web hosting industry was surprised when Cloud Linux stepped up to replace it. Cloud Linux announced they'd be backing a free RHEL clone in January of 2021. And by March, we had set up the nonprofit and had our initial set of corporate sponsors and our backers, and our board members. We took up the charge and got this going. So it was going to be Fedora, and then CentOS Stream, and then Red Hat, and then we were building from Red Hat's sources. In March, we also had our first release, March of 2021. We had our first release, 8.3, I think it was. So we, in less than 3 months, went from 0 to our first release out the door. And with the release of 8.6 and 9.0 in May of 2022, we had expanded to support 4 architectures that our community needed. The folks walked in and said, I need this support, and we helped them make it happen. In June of 2023, Red Hat announced one other thing, that they would no longer be shipping the sources for Red Hat to git.centos.org. And what that meant for us was that they completely broke our pipeline, and we had to really take our time to figure out what we were going to do to solve that. We talked to our community, talked to our users, talked to our sponsors, talked to the people who were most invested in what we were doing, and made the decision that what our community needed wasn't just a Red Hat copy. It was the statement that we kept hearing was, if something works on Red Hat, I want to know that it will work on AlmaLinux too. So ABI compatibility, or just general compatibility with Red Hat, is what they needed. And that meant that we shifted to this. So now we are embracing that freedom. We build from the same sources as Red Hat. We match release cadences and versions, pulling our code from publicly available and open sources. Ultimately, what this means for us is freedom. We have unchained our own hands, and we get to do the things that our community needs us to do, whether or not that's what Red Hat has decided to do for its community. We get to ship critical bug fixes or security flaws faster. We have extra repos for testing and for software that isn't in EPEL, the extra packages for Enterprise Linux, or in other repositories, because it's what our community needs. Most recently, we were able to include patches for a flaw that Red Hat had not yet patched because their community didn't need it yet, and ours very much did. I talked about web hosting a bit. Because we got our start with Cloud Linux, web hosting has very much embraced us. But web hosting, and honestly a lot of other people who have adopted us, are multi-tenant systems. And this flaw was a multi-tenant system trivially exploitable root exploit. And if you got a user on a system that was running this version, or an exploitable version, you could get roots in, I think it was less than 10 seconds. And it was very easy to exploit, and it was scary. But Red Hat's user base didn't need this flaw patched with the same urgency that ours did. So we got to ship it ahead of time. And it's that kind of stuff that has really been the best part for me. Most recently, actually as of this morning, we released AlmaLinux 8.10, and we're seeing another thing that we get to do. We've got a bunch of users who are still using older hardware and need to continue to see support for that hardware. Red Hat had deprecated it, and we've agreed and acted to continue support for that older hardware because that's what our community needs from us. It was the kind of thing that we would not have been able to do a year ago, and now we can. It's been very exciting. Speaking of our community, one of the first places that folks showed up for us was in the mirror system. We launched our first beta with just one mirror. By the release of 8.3 in March, we had expanded to 12 mirrors. By April, we had 60 mirrors, and we ended 2021 with 174 mirrors. At this point, we have more than 350 mirrors. Those are hosted by schools or businesses or companies that support our mission for one reason or another. And the public mirror system, I mean, we're across 6 continents, and that to me, with the numbers and the reach, tells me exactly how important AlmaLinux is to so many people.
And I believe you have a mirror in Azure as well.
Oh, I think we have 2.
Exactly. You're in Azure. One more reason to run Alma in Azure.
Yeah, local mirrors.
Content locally, which would be a big deal.
Exactly. In late 2021, we added a feature called Count Me. It's an optional flag that allows us to count devices that are calling home to our mirror system for updates. This is where we really start to see the impact of what we're doing. You can see we've got what was kind of a linear line very much becoming an exponential line. We're expecting to see 1 million devices calling home to our mirrors for updates in the next few months. This is only systems that are using our mirrors. So if they're using their own mirrors, we don't see them because we don't count those systems in any way. And these devices are sticking around. You can see they're not ephemeral. They're literally set them up, and then they're here for a long time. Everything from telephony to education to large data manipulation. Like I'm sure everyone has seen CERN, and companies like Zoom and Chevron and Comcast are all using AlmaLinux. And it's been super exciting for me to see this kind of stuff because it means we're really filling a need that needed to be there, or that needed to be satisfied. As an open source project, we have very little insight into who is using us, but what we do see is amazing. From the smaller home users to the many hundred devices to the many thousand devices, we're seeing people talk about how they're using AlmaLinux all over the place. From the everyday to the extremely remarkable, we're finding AlmaLinux all over the place, and it's exciting.
I didn't know BART runs on Alma. That's all.
I didn't either. I found out because Twitter.
I used to spend a lot of time on BART.
It's the kind of thing that, like, literally, I would have no reason to know, and that's kind of the cool thing that's about open source. Like, you can use a project and rely on it, and the project never has to know that you do, and that's okay with me. I love to see companies that have money give back to open source, like Microsoft does. But if you need to use it because it's stable and you don't have the resources to give back, then that's okay too. That's why we exist, right? So, how how are folks getting to AlmaLinux? Given that we're only 3 years old and we've got such wide adoption, we must have made it extremely easy. And that's true. There are 2 paths to getting in there, depending on where you're coming from. And we'll talk about both of them. The first one is AlmaLinux deploy. This one you're going to use if you're coming from CentOS 8 or any of the ones in that list. I'm not going to read them all out. This one acts very simply to essentially just swap out your repos. You run that script. It takes a little bit, not this one's the quick one. And then you reboot and you're into AlmaLinux. Very straightforward, very easy. The other one that we're excited about is Project Elevate, which allows you to upgrade without migrating your data. One of the goals that we have had as a project is to smooth out all of the pain points that we encountered as CentOS users. And that included upgrading between major versions. Every time a new version of CentOS came out, we had to set up a new server, or like attempt to duplicate the environment with a new operating system, and then migrate everybody's data. And that takes forever. And it's such a pain in the butt. So Project Elevate attempts to correct that. If you're coming from CentOS 6, CentOS 7, or you're migrating between major versions, so for example, from AlmaLinux 8 to AlmaLinux 9, you use Project Elevate to get there. It is very straightforward, but it definitely is more complicated. You'll see there's some caveats. CentOS Stream 8 to 9 is still being worked on. Oracle Linux 8 to 9 won't be supported in Elevate because they actually forked it and made their own version. So you'll use the Oracle Linux version of Elevate. You can even see Rocky is there, because for us, being an active member of the community means supporting the entire community. Project Elevate is getting a lot of attention right now, especially because of the CentOS 7 end of life. This is, like I said, it's necessarily significantly more complex. So you update your system, make sure that you are already on the newest version of whatever OS you're using, CentOS 6 or CentOS 7, and then you install the Elevate release package, and then you install the package that you're going to, the package for the OS you're going to, and then there's a pre-upgrade check, because of course there is. There are a lot of things that we have identified that are kind of gotchas. So that, like, this will cause a problem, or this will make it unbootable, or that kind of stuff. You adjust for those things, and then you run the upgrade, and then that takes a while. Then there's two reboots that happen. One to handle the BIOS stuff, and then one to get you into the new OS. And then you are on the new OS. There's a demo on YouTube that you can watch. There's a quick start guide. There are tons and tons and tons of people that have done this. But we still get this question a lot, a lot. It absolutely will work. We talked about the Oracle fork already. This project is so useful that it has been forked twice. The reality is that upgrading in place is a huge boon for a number of people. Like, I know, Claus, like you said, it is cleaner and better if you can set up a system that will, that you can redeploy. Like you said, you can get everything out there in a clean way and migrate the data the way that it needs to be. But for the people that it's not possible, this is really the way to go. It's really so much easier.
And by the way, I just wanted to say is we definitely have customers do this, right? Mm-hmm. So our telemetry, I can tell where they started and where they ended up. It's installed everything, so I can absolutely see systems that started off as CentOS systems, and now they're running Alma, and sometimes multiple versions upgraded. So customers do it, and there's really good reasons for doing so.
Yeah.
It's more of a preference, as you said. Is if you have the option to redeploy, it's always cleaner.
Yeah.
If you architect your workloads right, it should be easy to do. But there's absolutely scenarios where it is sometimes the only choice is to upgrade in place, and we do see that, and they run just fine.
Yeah, there's actually this screenshot from Reddit is a person who actually, we'll see a blog post come out from them here in a couple weeks, that the day that we released CentOS 6 support, they had 2 devices that were running CentOS 6. And so they were like, yes! And they went and upgraded from 6, obviously, to 7, and then went to 8. And one of them, they got to 9. And that kind of stuff, like, just makes my heart so happy, because that means that we're really, truly impacting the security of the whole internet. Like, the people who would not otherwise be on a secure system are now on a secure system instead of being on an OS that is wildly out of date. So that for me is the exciting part. One of my favorite stories, there was a person who came up to me at Supercompute, where it's a conference that is focused on high performance computing. And they were super excited that we were there, and explained that they had just migrated 50,000 devices using Elevate from CentOS 7 to AlmaLinux 9. And it was all in place. And he said it took about a month, and because it was relatively simple systems, but they were going to have to go through and like manually reinstall all of them, and it was going to be a huge pain in the butt the way that they managed it, because it was all individual devices that were in remote locations. And he said once they had tested, a couple, and then found the kinks and worked that out, and then they did 50, and then he did 100, and then they did 10,000, and he said we stepped up the number that we did, with intention, but by the time we were done, they were all migrated and they were all working just fine. And that's the kind of stuff that makes me super happy. We are solving this problem that in the enterprise Linux ecosystem we have all had this whole time. And it's really, really awesome, because it's been so widely used. We have seen a lot of people come into the chat with questions, and then stick around to help other people. So if you are using either Deploy or Elevate, you're going to go to the migration channel, and you're going to see a bunch of people asking questions and getting help from other users that have used it, or from the people who are working on it in development, or just people who are engaged with the community in that kind of way. That's been also exciting to see, as people giving back to the project by just helping each other out.
I actually wanted to comment on one other thing there, as you mentioned, the security angle, right?
Yeah.
At least I don't know how it is outside of Microsoft, but at Microsoft, security has just become everybody's job number one, right? And at the core of the whole end of life process, especially if you go permanently end of life or coming out of extended life, right? It is about security, right? Yeah, these systems may still work, right? And some customers, I know they will take the chance, right, and just say, hey, it still works, and until there's a compelling event, I'm just going to keep running like this. From a security perspective, unless there's literally nothing running on those systems that are of any matter, which I would doubt if that is a lot of them.
Like, why is it online if that's true?
Exactly. Security is, it's everybody's job number one. Doesn't matter what your role is. Security is job number one.
Yeah.
So migrating to something that has a security lifecycle and future is the only way to go, in my humble opinion. Then the other thing I wanted to point out is that in our customer discussions, right, we said, community versus commercial, FIPS, all those things. CIS compliance was another big one. Not everybody, but quite a few people basically said it's got to be CIS compliant, right?
Yeah.
And actually, one of our fast track engineers found this GitHub repo where someone on your side actually went through the trouble to figure out how to make an Alma system CIS compliant. So hats off to you for that. Thank you. And we should link that below. I think a lot of people,
I should. You're right.
yeah, we should definitely link that before, because it was really good. He was very impressed with it. And, was very happy to see that, because it solved a big problem for him. So it was good to see that you guys invested there.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I think we'll just call it.